For decades, recycling has been championed as a solution to the global plastic waste crisis. Governments, corporations, and environmental organizations have promoted the idea that by sorting and recycling plastic, we can reduce pollution, save the planet, and live more sustainably. But what if the very system that promises to protect the environment is actually a smokescreen for deeper, more insidious problems? Is plastic recycling really the green solution it's made out to be, or is it a myth designed to pacify a concerned public? At the core of this myth is the idea that recycling can manage the sheer volume of plastic waste we produce. Globally, millions of tons of plastic are generated each year, but only a small percentage is actually recycled. Most plastic, including the ubiquitous single-use items, is either incinerated, dumped into landfills, or worse, ends up in the ocean. What most people don't realize is that plastic recycling is not a simple, clean process. Unlike glass or aluminum, which can be melted down and reused with minimal degradation, plastic degrades each time it is recycled. This means that plastic can only be recycled a few times before it becomes unusable. Even then, the process itself is energy-intensive and often results in toxic byproducts. As a result, much of the plastic that is placed in recycling bins never truly gets recycled. It's downcycled into lower-quality products that will eventually end up in the trash anyway. The notion that plastic recycling is a solution has also been heavily promoted by the very industries that produce plastic. Corporations have found a convenient way to avoid accountability for the environmental damage they cause by shifting the burden of responsibility onto consumers. They have created a system where the public is made to believe that the solution lies in individual actions, sorting waste, buying products with the recycling symbol, while continuing to pump out massive amounts of single-use plastic. This phenomenon is known as greenwashing. These corporations, often backed by lobbying efforts, also influence legislation to ensure that plastic production remains high while avoiding stricter regulations. They fund campaigns that emphasize recycling as the answer, diverting attention away from the more difficult but necessary conversation about reducing plastic production at the source. Another issue with plastic recycling is that it often isn't economically viable. Different types of plastic require different processing methods, and not all types are even recyclable. The global market for recycled plastic fluctuates, and it's often cheaper for manufacturers to produce new plastic than to use recycled material. This economic reality means that much of the plastic that could be recycled isn't, simply because it's not profitable. In many countries, the majority of the plastic that is collected for recycling is shipped overseas to developing nations. There, it's often improperly managed, burned in open air, or dumped, further contributing to environmental degradation. This has led to what many call waste colonialism, where wealthier nations export their waste problems rather than deal with them at home. While the recycling symbol on a plastic bottle may evoke images of a clean, circular process, the reality is far messier. The environmental impact of plastic production and disposal is immense. Plastics are derived from petroleum-based materials, and their production involves energy-intensive processes that release harmful emissions, contributing to air and water pollution, as well as the depletion of natural resources. Additionally, plastics don't biodegrade. They break down into microplastics, tiny particles that contaminate water, soil, and even the air we breathe. The reality is that plastic recycling does little to address these broader environmental concerns. In many ways, it serves as a distraction from the urgent need to reduce plastic production and find sustainable alternatives. As long as we continue to rely on recycling as the primary solution, we are ignoring the larger systemic changes that are needed to tackle the plastic crisis. So if recycling isn't the answer, what is? The truth is that solving the plastic problem requires a multifaceted approach. First and foremost, there needs to be a significant reduction in plastic production, particularly single-use plastics. Governments must implement policies that incentivize alternatives and hold corporations accountable for the waste they generate. Consumers, too, can push for change by supporting companies that prioritize sustainability and by reducing their reliance on plastic. In addition to reducing plastic production, we need to invest in innovative technologies and systems that offer truly sustainable solutions. Biodegradable materials, reusable packaging, and closed-loop production systems are just a few of the alternatives that have the potential to replace traditional plastic. Governments must also take action to build better waste management infrastructures, ensuring that the plastic we do produce is handled in the least harmful way possible. Finally, it's essential to shift the narrative around plastic waste. Recycling, while important in some cases, is not a silver bullet. We need to be honest about its limitations and recognize that real progress requires systemic change. Only by addressing the root causes of plastic pollution can we effectively solve the problem. However, a significant barrier to resolving the plastic problem is that governments and corporations are controlled by entities that do not prioritize sustainable solutions. These entities often seek power and control over environmental responsibility, hindering the necessary changes needed to combat plastic pollution effectively. Conclusion. The plastic recycling myth has persisted for far too long, offering a convenient but false solution to a complex problem. While recycling has its place, it is not the answer to the plastic crisis. We must look beyond recycling and focus on reducing plastic production, holding corporations accountable, and seeking out sustainable alternatives. Only then can we begin to tackle the environmental damage caused by plastic and create a healthier, more sustainable future for our planet.